Got it. Should I start the, I will admit people now, or you can do the same thing, I guess, no.
I'll let you do, I mean, unless, yeah, you're going to be in charge and I'll just come in.
Okay. 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 Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Evrim Binbaş. I will be hosting today's virtual event series. This is our 10th meeting in our virtual event series, and the second in post-war historiography series. What we will do today is I will first let the microphone invite Joanne Gross to microphone so that she can explain the logic of the series a little bit, and then we will start our meeting. So Joanne, would you like to say a few words about our series?
Yes, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. And welcome to part 2 of the 10th series of the ASPS virtual event series on post-war Persianate historiography, organized by Evrim Binbaş. I'm Joanne Gross, chair of the 2022-2023 virtual event series committee. And as some of you may know, we initially organized this series in the middle of COVID lockdowns and the many conference cancellations that we all experienced in 2020-21, and as a way for ASPS members to remain in contact with one another and to engage in the research of our colleagues on the history and culture of Persianate societies. And our international series has been so successful that we've continued it through the present. And I would like to acknowledge my colleagues who have served on the committee with me, Acting President Kazuo Morimoto, Evrim Binbaş, and Gershon Leventhal. Just to give you some idea about the kinds of events that we have sponsored, they included a talk by Dr. Balaram Shukla on morphological similarities between Sanskrit and Persian, a 2-panel virtual event on arguing the place of the Prophet's family in the Persianate world and medieval Persianate culture in China, a book launch on connected histories in Central Asia, 18th to 20th centuries, an online study day at Spagnienza University of Rome on exploring contemporary Shiism, a virtual roundtable on perspectives on studying Afghanistan, and part 1 of the post-war Persianate historiography series on an institute not to be, a conversation with John Woods on the Pahlavi Institute for Near Eastern Studies at the University of Chicago between 1966 and 1970. We have an ongoing 3-part mini conference on Iranian heritage in today's world, coming from Jagiellonian University in Krakow. And the third part of this mini-series on Iranian heritage in global and regional context will take place very soon on November 28th. So I think it's quite clear that the ASPS virtual event series has been highly successful in drawing together a full range of topics by scholars across the globe who engage in the study of Persian societies. All of our events are recorded, including today's, which will be available on YouTube. But it is a very special pleasure and a privilege for me to welcome you today to our 10th virtual event series. In today's talk by Professor Christiane Gruber of the University of Michigan, titled Archaeological Photography as Scholarly Method, Oleg Gruber at Kasal Shaki. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanne. The idea of post-war historiography series emerged last year, and after a conversation with several of my friends. And the idea is basically that when we talk about our discipline, we tend to focus on the 19th century, 18th century, even earlier periods. But we believe that our discipline is mature enough so that we can focus on more recent periods, the post-war historiography. Today, we are tremendously lucky to have Professor Christiane Gruber of University of Michigan. Professor Gruber requires no introduction in this company, of course. She is one of the leading scholars of Islamic art in the late medieval and early modern periods, and in modern periods as well. Today, actually, she will talk about one of her sort of rare interventions in modern historiography. I actually own a copy of the book here on Oleg Gruber. And the title of her talk is Archaeological Photography as Scholarly Method. And then she will introduce us as one of the leading figures or founding figures in Islamic art, Oleg Gruber of Princeton, I should say, the latest. Anyway, Christy, please, floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Evrim. Thanks, Joanne. I see some old friends and colleagues on my screen. I'm so happy to see you guys. Thanks for being here. Before I start my talk, I just want to dispel the notion that this is a topic on Iran and say a few words about Oleg Gruber. Most of you have heard of Oleg Gruber. For those of us in the field of Islamic art, architecture, visual culture, he's a giant. He's considered one of the founding figures of the field in the United States. As Evrim mentioned, he did his PhD both in Paris and at Princeton, getting his PhD in 1955. Son of the famous Byzantinist Andrei Gruber, so a Francophone, eventually Jewish emigre to the United States. So he's trained in the late antique period, eventually came into his own working on the greater Middle East. He started his career where I am now, at the University of Michigan, and it's from the University of Michigan that he led his first and major archaeological dig, Qasr al-Hira Sharqi in Syria, which I'll talk about today. But before I launch into that topic, I know that this is a historiography series, so just a few more words about Gruber. After Michigan, he was at Michigan between 1954 and 69, so this is post-war historiography. Harvard then poached him, where he's in the company of Andras Riddlemeyer, who I see on the screen. Hi, Andras. And then after that, he landed at the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton again, where he stayed for the rest of his life. He passed on in 2011, unfortunately. So Qasr al-Hira that I mentioned was his first dig. He became very famous for it. And then came a whole series of other books on the Dome of the Rock, on ornament, on Persian miniatures. That's when he started to branch out into Persianate materials with the great Mongol Shahnameh. He wrote a big book called Mostly Miniatures on Persian book arts, and he also became known for his book on the Great Mosque of Isfahan as well. And he teamed up with Richard Eddinghausen to write the major survey of Islamic art and architecture up till about 1250. So that's just a brief sketch of his life. He was active in the Arab Middle East, but also branched out to Iran. Today, I'll share my screen. I am actually going to be taking you to the birth of his scholarship, which is in Syria. So let me make sure everything looks okay. Everything looking good on your end?
Sounds perfect. I mean, you sound very well, and then the screen is very good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thanks for confirming. So today we'll be in Syria. Without further ado, let me begin. Let me see here. Okay. In 1964, Oleg Gruber prepared for his first season of archaeological excavation at Qasr al-Hira Sharqi, and Umayyad period urban settlement located in the semi-arid Syrian steppe known as the Badia. He had identified this 8th century site during an exploratory campaign in the Middle East that was organized by George Forsyth, then director of the Kelsey Museum of Archaeology at the University of Michigan. As a young and very studious professor of Islamic art at Michigan, Gruber turned to Forsyth for help in securing logistical support and financial resources under the museum's sponsorship. Although Gruber personally identified and recruited members of his excavation team, the eventual hire of an official archaeological photographer was prompted by Forsyth, who considered the museum's photographer Fred Underegg as ideal for the task. And here I show you Fred all the way up here on a dump truck, what he used to take aerial photography. Fred, or Fredo, as he was affectionately known, had earned Forsyth's esteem for his photographic work at the Michigan-Princeton expeditions at the Monastery of St. Catherine's in the Sinai a few years prior. Adding to his international renown, Underegg's photographs of the icons and mosaics of the Eastern Orthodox Church complex were published that very same year in the National Geographic special issue dedicated to Mount Sinai. Gruber, however, responded to Forsyth's suggestion to hire a professional photographer with great reluctance, stating, quote, "About the photographer, I don't feel as strongly as you do on Fredo, because I am not as excited about beautiful photographs as the whole department knows by now. We can always rely on intellectual reconstructions if the photography is mediocre, but I simply don't have the money for a good photographer and don't want to use up what I have. Photographers are a curious race as artists in that they only live by clicks," end quote. Gruber's lukewarm response points to several interlinked concerns. Besides his financial worry about the cost of photography, which rises exponentially with every click of the camera, the biggest anxiety that we can detect here is what I call the problem of the pretty, namely that an object of pulchritude cannot be an object of intellection. This attractiveness stereotype, wherein an aesthetically pleasurable item or image is deemed unsatisfactory at the cerebral level, was not limited to Gruber, however. Going back to the 1950s, scholarly debates unfolded on how an archaeological photograph produced in a scientific context could also manifest artistic and aesthetically pleasing qualities, thanks to compositional balance and centering, leading lines, tonal and textual effects, and the use of filters. Positing truth against artistry, Gruber, like so many archaeologists of his generation, worried about the loss of informational accuracy and analytical rigor to the lure of the pretty. And yet, Underegg indeed joined the Kassel-Hair team, shooting thousands of photographs of the excavation, its structural features and remains, and its small finds such as ceramics and coins. These photos display technical skill, and they are informational in their contents. Sometimes they also happen to be beautiful, evocative, or even eerie. Not limiting himself to archaeological photography alone, Underegg also took many shots of Gruber and his colleagues at work and rest, engaging professionally and socially with Syrian colleagues and field personnel, and embarking on road trips, including to nearby Palmyra, which you see here in the black and white shot. His photos transcend a purely machinic eye, to borrow Michael Shank's expression, to reveal his deep interest in the human beings that were living and laboring at the site, forging friendships and solving logistical and intellectual challenges along the way. Underegg's voracious photographic activity thus provides us with a visual record of life on the dig, active as both archive and witness to an archaeological moment of encounter between a historical past and a lived present. And what better topic really to embark on for historiographical purposes. Underegg's photographic oeuvre activates multiple historical stratigraphies. His black and white photographs carry the evidentiary force deemed necessary for the type of archaeology that by the mid-20th century was considered processual and therefore more objective. Based on scientific data, engaged with model testing, and propelled by deductive argumentation and logical conclusion, processual archaeology of the 1960s replaced the Orientalist antiquarian endeavors of old. Conversely, some of Underegg's more informal snapshots of the Kastelhaer team are gleefully subjective, propelling us into an emotive rather than academic field. Whether evidentiary or subjective, taken all together, these photographs of the site, its building, and its people offer a reminder that, according to Frederick Bohrer, archaeological photographs are, quote, as much about the diggers as the things dug, end quote. The Kastelhaer photographic corpus at the Kelsey Museum acts above all as an archaeological site per se. It preserves in material and visual form the remains of places and people both come and gone. Such photographs capture what is often left unrecorded and unspoken. Yet looming behind each and every shot is a story, a thought, an emotion, a conversation, a labor, and even a strand of hair cut and strewn to the wind. Such ephemeral acts, exchanges, and instances cannot be severed from the scientific and the historiographical process itself. Moreover, beyond the photographic image, focusing the lens on this human element of archaeological work must rely on participant interviews as well. For these reasons, my talk today will weave into its narrative the voice of Renata Holled, Professor Emerita at the University of Pennsylvania, a former PhD student of Oleg Gruber, a key member of the DIG team for the entirety of the excavation, and my very own Dr. Mutter. Her explanations of life and work on the dig and of what we see, and just as importantly, what we do not see, captured in the photographs, enable a fuller understanding of scientific processes and tools, logistics and environment, and general living conditions at Kastelhaer from 1964 to 1971, so the years of the excavation. While this type of photoethnographic reconstruction does not offer a remedy to the destructive character of archaeological work, it nevertheless can re-enliven a historical landscape in Syria that remains largely beyond our reach today. So moving forward, Fred Underegg was considered by some, quote unquote, a genius with film. Obsessed with achieving the highest possible quality in terms of clarity of composition and tonal balance, he erred on the side of excessive quantity. He was not just a shutter-happy cameraman, though. His ultimate aim consisted in capturing those rare and precious photographic diamonds in the rough, so he did not hesitate to discard shots that he considered less than perfect or substandard. Lacking a penchant for hoarding, photos that he deemed not crisp enough were swiftly cast aside as mere quote-unquote fuzzy graphs. And I love that expression of his. Underegg himself admitted in 1971, after years of experience on the ground, that he disliked quote-unquote mushy images, and it is for this reason that he preferred the Nikon over the Leica camera. Besides proper technological equipment, Underegg understood that the best moments for site photography were the early morning and late afternoon, at which time the rising and setting sun's raking light illuminates well the contours of sculptural ornamentation and architectonic details, as well as the topography of the surrounding landscape. When not endeavoring outdoors, he also kept busy shooting photographs of the excavation's small finds and developing film in the darkroom on site. His tools and strategies can be detected in a number of photographs, including of the dig's small finds. For instance, he often arranged ceramic sherds artfully, as you can see here on the right, for these lusterwares that were actually traded with Persianate lands. Here he's arranged them in a nice arch formation. Their curvatures and textures adding depth and dimension to the composition. The fragments' edges are chiseled and their angles sharp. Andreg's calculated emphasis on these jagged diagonals endows the photograph with a materially propelled dynamism. The luminescence of the objects and their painted decoration are likewise accentuated thanks to a strong light and black background. This sharp, somewhat ethereal luster is a hallmark technique in the field of art photography, as is its emphasis on the pellucid, airy-form outline of glass. So you'll notice on the left, Andreg really enjoyed that kind of pellucid, air-like quality of glass itself. From ceramics to glasswares, Andreg achieved dazzling visual effects thanks to a very simple implement, namely a foldable background outfitted with dark fabric on one side and a foil to catch light on the other. Sometimes that foil was so basic, it was just aluminum. His artful do-it-yourself pragmatism no doubt compensated for the limited resources at Kassel-Heer. Beyond these aesthetic concerns, Andreg's photographs at the excavation had to convey scientific and historical information. Above all, the accurate size of buildings and objects. As can be seen in his photograph of ceramic sherds on the right, an unfurled tape measure in the foreground offers a relative scale in centimeters. This graduated device embedded within the photograph in turn could confirm or correct data recorded in the dig's written archives and published records. Andreg's aesthetic mise-en-scène yielded thus a photo assemblage that bolstered an objective correlative and integrated historical and visual praxis that quieted Gruber's initial contrariness, positing beauty versus truth. Besides the measuring tape, between 1950 and 1980, the rod scale served as a material stand-in for the professionalized discipline of archaeology. This object symbol, that is the rod scale, engaged in a scientific visual aesthetics, in part precipitated by four key publications of the 1950s and 1960s, namely Cookson's Photography in Archaeology and his Photography for Archaeologists, Matthew's Photography in Archaeology and Art, and Simon's Archaeological Photography. So the 50s and 60s were major for the development of archaeological photography as a method. Writing in 1954, Cookson encouraged excavation teams to hire a professional, as site photography is a full-time task for one person.
We lost Christie's voice. Just let's wait a few seconds.
I heard something there.
Christy, we lost you for like 20 seconds or so. Can you sort of rewind just a few sentences back and then?
Where did you lose me, Evrim?
Just 20 seconds or so, briefly.
Did you hear all of the books or no?
No, we heard all of these. It's just like the last a few sentences.
Okay. So as he took on duties as Kassel-Heer's, can you hear me now? Because I hear
yes.
you. Okay.
Yes.
As he took on duties as, thank you. As he took on duties as Castle Hare's photographer, Underegg no doubt was familiar with contemporary discourses about both archaeology and photography, two interconnected fields that Simons described in 1969 as quote unquote, two siblings that grew together. Indeed, as techniques in the former developed, more and better photography has been demanded, and better photography has contributed to improved archaeology, end quote. Such photo-archaeological endeavors were nothing if not co-emergent and co-constitutive. As Underegg's photographic work at Castle the team's interpretation of the site. For example, many of the ceramic pipes suggested a complex underground system that transported water throughout the site. In his photographs of these pipes, Underegg arranged the prerequisite measuring sticks and rod scales as new scientific methods dictated. So here you see the rod scale on the right and the measuring stick on the left. However, in selecting his lighting source, he opted for raking into the pipe's deep grooves, which, depending on their lateral or longitudinal layout, could either slow down or accelerate water flow. In addition, in such light could stress empty areas, including the round hole that you see in this photograph shown on the left. So here is the hole that he's trying to pick out through raking light. This hollow element, emphasized through shadow relief, could help formulate hypotheses or raise questions, including why some pipe openings were filled with ceramic plugs. So now scholars think it was to direct water in a particular area, kind of like a kitara or a sagiya in Morocco. While a clear answer still remains elusive, the photographic data can offer reliable and permanent reservoir of information. As the rod scale became an integral feature in the visual grammar of archaeological illustration, the human body and intellect continued to tend to the task of uncovering historical materials and inferring meaning from evidence. On the one hand, the insistence on individual presence and labor reasserts archaeology as a social and humanistic discipline. On the other, it helps to animate the scientific process, which is itself populated by many actors, from scholars to workmen, cooks, and drivers. Oftentimes, in his photographs, Underegg emphatically asserts the centrality of the human being above and beyond the rod scale. Not merely stick figures falling into line, the protagonist called scientific images have tales to tell, inviting both participation and alienation in our own lives and those of others. This feeling of betrays an impenetrable distance, leaving us to wonder what has become of the workmen of Castle Hare, who wore checkerboard kufiyas on their heads to protect themselves from the scorching desert sun. How did they experience the excavation? And are they or their children still alive in Syria today? And how could their memories of the dig variegate the authoritative narratives put forward by scholars and a photographic corpus that, in its own alienated form of participation, retains hints of their past lives? While their voices and memories are sadly not available to me at the present moment, it is to their daily lives that the Castle Hare scholars and excavators are quite well known, their publications leaving a track record and their epistolary acts suffusing the archival record. The local Syrian workmen, however, prove a different story. As is often the case with history told from above, their experiences and viewpoints have largely passed unnoticed. Offering somewhat of a corrective, Andre's photographs provided grassroots visual history thanks to his keen interest in portrait photography. Indeed, it appears that he was especially drawn to the field personnel, while actions of their particular communities and characters are preserved by team members, such as Renata Hollet. Conjoining memory with photography in a duo that we might call the Menno photo can prove one means of telling world histories from below, of capturing a life world by slightly skirting a top-down account. In regards to Castle hair and other excavation practices, memo photos like the one we see here reveal that archaeology is not just about the past, but is as much about the people, ideas, and networks which allow the past to be occurred. In other words, these photographs provide an alternative terrain for excavation and reimagination. While a handwritten note from the 1970s season records the workmen at Castle hair as numbering around 50, Hollet recalls as many as 150 on the ground at any given moment. These varying numbers suggest that the workforce could grow and contract over the years. Some of the workers commuted from the nearby towns of Atayiba, As-Sukhna, and Tadmur, which most of you know also as Palmyra. So if you look at this map, Castle hair is here in the Badia of Syria, and Atayiba, As-Sukhna, and Palmyra, Tadmur basically are the closest towns. So most of them came from these three cities, while others were in fact camel herding Bedu or Bedouins of the Sba tribe who migrated for summer pastures across the Euphrates River. While the latter lived close to the site in temporary tents, the village of Atah, whose name means the good one or the water source, was home to recently settled, well-nourished men. Of larger and stronger disposition than the transhuman Bedouins, they served as the site's pickmen. They needed stronger muscles, said Renata Hollet. This line of required power and attention to detail so as to not destroy important elements uncovered at the excavation site. Women were tasked with various duties, such as removing debris, transporting supplies, and holding measuring rods for Andrek site photography. They thus were not as well remunerated as the more able-bodied locals. Despite the hierarchical division of labor, the Bedouin, local villagers, and foreign scholars often shared responsibilities and food. Other moments at the excavation are captured in Andrek's photographs, among them the ringing in of the workday and celebrations of payday. Packing a bang, these impromptu photographs capture the emotion of joy and the dynamism of sound. As they channel exclamations of the human voice, the stomping of feet in the desert sand, and the clanging of work tools, they capture an entire archaeosensorium that is a soundscape that forms an indelible yet often overlooked element of work on the ground. Beyond their obvious uses for digging, carrying, and cleaning, workers' tools functioned as heraldic devices of sorts. Many of Andereg's photographs capture men with their implements as if they were coat of arms, or at least objects of individual expression, as you can see here with pickaxes and other implements. In some ways, these objects symbolically replaced the swords, knives, and rifles of the Bedou who had been disarmed during the French occupation of Syria between 1923 and 1943. By the 1960s, many of the excavation's workmen were first-generation, recently settled Bedouins, whose power and independence in the steppe became increasingly curtailed under the independent Syrian Republic and then Ba'athist regime. Working at the excavation site allowed them to earn income to carry on living as a community in the wake of the country's development-induced displacement that threatened their traditional livelihoods and desert cultures. When one thus looks back at Castle hair with the clarity of time elapsed, it therefore becomes clear that the dig catalyzed a seasonal place of settlement for the Sba tribesmen at a critical moment in their displacement history. Among the workmen, one individual reigns supreme in the team members whose name means born in the middle of the summer, or Qaid. Measuring less than 5 feet tall, the diminutive Qaidi was the expedition house guardian, but he also tended to various odds and ends, including cleaning ceramic sherds and holding measuring rods when the need arose. He was loved
Christy, we lost your PowerPoint presentation and your sound.
Am I back on now?
Yes, yes.
I wonder if it was on my end, or was it on my end? I don't know. So
I mean, we stopped at the moment when you introduced Qaidi.
okay, not
yeah.
too bad.
Yeah.
Okay, not too bad. Let's see. So that individual is Qaidi, whose name means born in the middle of the summer, and measuring less than 5 feet tall, the diminutive Qaidi was hired as the expedition house guardian, but he also tended to various odds and ends, including cleaning sherds and holding measuring rods when the need arose. He was loved by many on the site, especially Oleg Gruber and Renata Khalid, who were able to communicate with him in Levantine Arabic in Shami. Moreover, Khalid al-Assad, former director of the Palmyra Museum, who was assassinated by ISIS in 2015, was particularly fond and protective of Qaidi due to his having been orphaned as a child. So let me get rid of these screens so I can point out. There we go. So here is Qaidi, who had a great way of tethering his shamla, his turban. And here is Oleg Gruber, and here is Khalid al-Assad, who was most unfortunately tortured and killed by ISIS when he refused to reveal the location of the Palmyra museum's antiquities. There's a lot that we can say about Khalid al-Assad based on the Kelsey Museum's archives. It's actually quite stunning. When not tending to his duties, Qaidi passed the days by singing Bedouin songs and praying towards Mecca. For the latter, he built a mihrab with stones that he gathered on site. Structure nearby, he turned his own self and Castlehare's archaeological remains into a makeshift prayer edifice. The soil under his feet acted as a masjid on terra firma, a place of prostration. In this case and others occurring outdoors or in a natural environment, Muhammad's statement that, quote, all earth is a mosque. As for his songs, and he was very well known for his Bedouin songs, they grew in number and expanded in content during the dig. In retrospect, Renata Khalid has expressed sadness that his Badawi tunes and the Kasrul-Hair workmen were not recorded. As in other nomadic, steppe, and desert-dwelling cultures, they preserved a rich oral tradition that has largely disappeared today. These prayers and songs inspirited the excavating experience, leaving traces in many individuals. Without photographic hints and ethnographic work, such life worlds remain secreted away in archival folders or else are left to linger in the fields of the forgotten. In some ways, the workers' contributions provide the uppermost stratum of the Kasrul-Hair's excavation. Rather than pushing it aside in a move that echoes in decades prior the clearing of Islamic layers of occupation at Greco-Roman sites in the Middle East, it is worth pausing and taking stock of what happened on the ground. The dig was nothing if not tough, grueling work. The late spring, early summer desert sun scorched the body. The sand abraded skin. The dust irritated eyes. Carrying large debris required brawn and energy, and water was very hard to come by. In point of fact, the contaminated water caused an outbreak of hepatitis during the second season, while amoebic dysentery regularly broke out among team members, including Renata Holland herself. Besides the elements, one time, Holland recalls, Gruber was bitten by a scorpion on the sole of his heel. The callus thickened by days of toiling in subpar footwear, providing him with the only available antidote to the venom. Other animals also resided on site. For example, a Bedouin workman caught a falcon roosting in one of the towers and then trained it for the hunt, while another, wearing protective goggles that he removed while taking a cigarette break, found a bunny and cradled it in his hands for Andreg's camera. It's a little disconcerting to see how close the cigarette is to the little bunny here. Here, one imagines that the baby animal was extracted from its burrow as if a delightful archaeological find. So even animals have their story in this process. The workmen sweated through thick and thin, including removing heavy stones and other debris that they transported away from the site with a dump truck. Standing in line formation, which they called a saf, an archaeological line formation, made the task speedier and more manageable, especially for the Bedou. The workers' coping strategies included wearing head coverings against the sun, loose clothing, and retreating to the shade during the afternoon hours. Their coping techniques also must have included oral beginning of work formulas, like, say, the Bismillah, and petitions for ease. One of these, known in short as the Rabbi Yassir prayer, or "O Lord, make it easy," ornaments the dump truck's door as a calligraphic roundel. So right here, you can see Rabbi Yassir on the door of the dump truck. The full petition goes as follows: "O Lord, make it easy. Do not make it difficult. O Lord, make it end well." And it's beautifully rhyming in Arabic. Like rain prayers that aim to secure agricultural fertility and abundance, the Rabbi Yassir petition belongs to a larger corpus of Islamic prayers that help individuals sustain vegetal and animal life, as well as to find strength in challenge and comfort in adversity. Like the local Syrian workmen, the team of foreign scholar excavators also sought out coolness during the afternoon hours and evenings. They retreated to the dig house known as Beit Michigan, or Michigan House, a structure built with locally available materials, including adobe and wooden beams. The individual rooms were essentially beehive huts, a type of vernacular architecture pervasive throughout the region, including at the centuries-old Upper Mesopotamian city of Haran. These domical homes are not only environmentally sensitive, but through their tapered form and mud walls, also provide an effective cooling system for their dwellers. And indeed, that form is also used in the yakhchal, or the ice pit, or evaporative cooler of Iran. And here you can see sort of a comparative form between Beit Michigan and the yakhchal of Abarku. Gruber and his colleagues must have favored this historical building tradition across Islamic lands for a number of reasons, above all its ease of construction and hence moderate cost. However, one should not fail to spotlight their eco-friendly attributes as well. Erected one day, these structures can be unbuilt the next, leaving no unsightly concrete, steel, aluminum, glass, or plastic rubble to waste in their wake. While beehive homes comprise an indigenous form of architecture for relatively sedentarized communities, tents are the nomads' abode par excellence. They can be carried on camel or donkey back, pitched and unpitched swiftly and easily, as individuals, family units, and tribes migrate from one place to the next or between summer and winter pastures. At Kasr el-Her, while the local workers of As-Sukhna commuted to work, the Spa tribesmen erected tents close to the dig site. In other words, the workers from the local villages and cities just commuted by car on a daily basis, whereas the Spa had to actually physically relocate for the duration of the dig. As Khalid recalls, these Bedu had two types of tents, of darkly colored wool for the winter season, and of lightly colored wool cotton blend for the spring and summer. These two types of tents are
Christy, we lost your voice again, or we lost Christy altogether. Just, oh, here you are.
Do you see me now?
Yes, perfect.
Fabulous. Sorry, it seems like we have connection issues today from Turkey.
That's all right.
Sorry about that. Evrim, where did it cut?
You said tent.
For this one, okay. So cut off very recently.
Or
Two
maybe,
types of
Christy, maybe can you turn off your camera and while speaking,
what's that?
Can you turn off your camera while giving your talk, and then we can turn it on again?
How about like?
Yes, yeah, let's try like this. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No, you're right. Sometimes when the camera's off, the connection is easier. Good idea. Thanks.
Yeah.
So these two types of tents, the white and the black one for summer, winter, you can see those in the background of this photograph. However, what appears in its foreground piques our interest. Here, a rectangular structure lined in stones, cobbled together outside of the ruined wall, with an open entryway that leads axially to a well-articulated niche. So here, the stones from the dig have been put on the ground, and you've got an opening here, and then you've got an articulated niche here. Those who have studied the basics of Islamic architecture will be quick to decipher the key elements of a mosque. In particular, the mihrab concavity, marking the Qibla wall, which is likely this Qibla wall here, that guides worshippers in congregational prayer towards Mecca. For their part, the upright stones at the four corners of the rectangular outline allude to minarets. So here, 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 they're slightly taller, so they mark the corners, maybe they allude to minarets. While the entryway's lateral stones index a monumental entrance, so a big gateway. This lapidary frame thus sketches an Arab hypostyle mosque as an architectonic foundation and praying together Kasr el-Her. Much like the nearby tents, this seasonal eco-mosque could be disbanded at the end of an excavation season, or at will by simply scattering its stones hither and there. While one might assume primarily a Bedouin agency or use, this stone mosque also catered to the local workmen who used this primordial structure to carry out their daily devotions. Indeed, the midday congregational prayer, or salah, formed part of a break that stretched between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. and included lunch and an afternoon rest, no doubt to avoid the sun. However, since the local workmen returned to their villages on Thursday evenings for the weekend, so Friday and Saturday, only the Bedouin remained on site. It is they who utilized the mosque for the Friday noontime communal prayer, transforming this humble ground plan into a fully fledged Friday mosque, or jami. Not merely an open space for prayer or a prayer station, as you can see here, or namazgah. The pebbled jami at Castle Hare catalyzes a host of questions about the religious architecture of Islam, including what types of structures allow open air. In its form and materials, this short, thick-set edifice is the leveraging of stopgap measures in architectural practice, one of whose outcomes could be called the makeshift mosque. So on the one hand, we've got an excavation mosque that sort of repurposes the debris of excavation as a, say, musalla. And on the other hand, the namazgah, or the prayer station, so open air mosque, and you see here that the minbar out in the open air as an example, also is used for open air prayers, vigils during Ramadan, other festivals, Eid al-Adha, and so on. So the photographs at Castle Hare actually makes us think twice about what we consider a mosque, changing our historiographical path somewhat. Just like Beit Michigan, the woolen tents, and the stone mosque, Castle Hare's summer weather came and went. The Badia hosted not only burning temperatures, stingy scorpions, and cute bunnies, but also the most awesome of climactic events in the shape of the Asifa, that is, a dust storm. In May 1966, Gruber wrote a letter to George Forsyth, and he describes the Asifa with these powerful words. Quote, "We have just been subjected to one of the most frightening and spectacular sights of desert life, a huge dust storm which simply changed day into night for a few hours and literally engulfed us," end quote. Almost 4 decades later, Holland also describes her dramatic memories of the Asifa in an interview that I conducted in December 2019. I have the audio here, but I'm going to skip it to make sure it doesn't wreck our connection. So I'll pick out just a couple sentences here. Quote, Renata says, "You could see the Asifa in the distance as a wall. It becomes completely dark in the middle of the day. It blew down every single tent. Everything was covered in red dust. It could last an entire day, causing total panic as the middle of the day turned into night," end quote. Holland goes on to say that while she, Gruber, and others would run to seek shelter in the dig house, the photographer Andreg, an intrepid storm chaser, sprinted in the opposite direction whenever a storm came their way. It is this photographic punctum, or suspense point, which shows Gruber standing next to 2 workers and a white tent as he looks back to the pinkish dust while rolling his way, that is immortalized in one of the most dramatic shots of Castle Hare. Acting as a prosthetic sensory device, this picture is aesthetically breathtaking, as well as redolent with the nostalgia that had yet to set in.
Jesus.
Digging below the archaeological photography at Castle Hare uncovers the beauties, difficulties of life and work on one particular dig that brought together a miscellany of individuals in the Badia during the late 1960s and early 1970s. At this moment in time, life carried on in new ways, even though tribes like the Sabah started of Syria. Foreign scholars, including Gruber and Holland, also embraced the rhythm of transhumance, shifting their summer labors from their American offices and undertaking historical work in the lands of the Middle East. Brought together under the circumstance of excavation work, a new community emerged, unearthed.
So sorry, we lost Christy again. Okay, here she is. Christy, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Yes, perfect.
What did you hear the last time?
I believe I heard unearthing.
Let's see. There we go.
Yeah.
We're almost so hopefully we won't break out one more time. Brought together under the occasional circumstance of excavation work, a new community emerged, unearthing a historical site and creating its own habitus along the way. Unlike the material remains of the dig, the short-lived culture of the Kasserlher expedition carries on embedded in individual memories, as well as ennobled in Andreg's photographs. Visually freezing this moment and place in time, the images craft their own archaeologizing effect. Scholars and workers labored, pondered, laughed, argued, got stung, contracted illnesses, and sang songs in this Umayyad urban entity, desert and the Somme. The Kelsey Museum's photographs capture these interwoven peoples and places, offering us a window into an entire land that has since vanished, but needs to be taken into account for historical. Each image, however, momentary light exposure developed in a dark room. Rather, beneath its surface are layers of sedimented meanings that require digging, exhuming, and explaining, in other words, of archaeological labor itself. As an alternative site for understanding the past, both remote and recent, the photos of Kasserlher remind us that even in the midst of a scientific endeavor, man remains the measure of all things. Perhaps then 1,000 clicks are precisely what was needed, although Gruber knew not at first. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Krista. This is a wonderful presentation. This is exactly what's post-war historiographical study means. That's what I was sort of imagining since the beginning. We have time for the questions and for general discussion. You can either write your questions in the chat box, or you can raise your hand by using the reactions button on the right-hand side, and and ask your question either by turning on your camera or without turning on your camera. So, who wants to start?
I just opened the chat, and I really like Barbara's comment that the
Oops, Christy, we lost you suddenly, or I lost you suddenly. Could you repeat what you just said?
No,
about?
I opened the chat and I saw Barbara's comment that even with the breaks, this is fantastic. And I love
Yes.
the idea that the breaks are people a moment to take their breath a little bit. Built-in breaks here.
Wonderful. So if there's no one sort of raising their hands, I would like to ask the first question. I believe so. I'm basically not an archaeologist, and I never attended archaeological digs. So before photography, what did they use? Did they use just hand drawings and basically painting? So in that sense, how did it change from the painting to the photography? So I believe in the past, before the machine, the painters attended the excavations, right? So what did the photographer bring that the painter did not have or was not able to do during an archaeological excavation?
That's a great question, because that's actually a debate over who gets to capture truth better. Before that, you'd have master illustrators, draw painters on your team. Now, the most famous sort of expedition with illustrators of that caliber was, of course, Napoleon's Expedition in Egypt, right? The Description d'Égypte. He had a massive team, right? And they produced large-scale drawings that were then, reproduced through the printing press. And so there are debates over the illustrative mode of the human hand and the quote-unquote machinic eye of the photograph once it was introduced. The proponents of photography said that you actually get to avoid human error and flights of fancy, right? Based on the premise that photography captures that which is real. It's a light silhouette captured, a simulacrum. But those who study the history of photography will be very quick to tell you that a photograph does not capture a light reality, because there are all sorts of manipulations, choices of angles. You can use different filters, you can omit certain things. But by far and large, it was seen as a mechanical and technological standardization of scientific data without the intrusion of potential misunderstandings or manipulations of the human hand. So in a way, the human hand had been taken out, even though we know very much that's not the case. So for Gruber, he thought all we can do is just do some drawings, right? Intellectual reconstructions is what he calls them. To his mind, just sketches and drawings would do the trick. But behold, there are tens of thousands of photographs that came out of this excavation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So any other, there is one question in the chat box. Should I read it or, yeah, let me read it. By Anne Mickelwright. Having grown up, academically speaking, with the stories of this excavation from Renata Hollott, I completely love the way you have taken those stories into a whole new place in terms of what they can tell us about the practice of archaeology in this period and the lived experiences of the teams. What are the next steps for this project? First of all, I mean, you didn't mention your book. You didn't. So let me show it. Let me first. There's actually a book on this topic by Christy and Michelle Ferzley. And the book is called City in the Desert Revisited. Oleg Gruber at Castrol Hayr al-Sharqi, 1961-1971. So this book is an introduction, a wonderful monograph, but also it's an introduction to the collection available in Ann Arbor. Yeah.
So thanks, Nancy. And I can add a little bit to that. That book you can download for free if you just go to the Calcium Museum. If you just do a little Google search. So if you want it as a PDF, we've available for free. And I have an essay in there, which is basically this paper on archaeological photography, because we were stunned at the size of the corpus in the Calcium Museum, because I grew up with these stories, but you don't get to see that other stratum of archaeological work. And it's absolutely to read the letters and the postcards between Khaled al-Assad and Oleg and other members of the team whom in fact. And Michelle Ferzley wrote an essay as well, sort of revisiting all of the arguments and hypotheses about the website in light of the new finds. And we picked 50 of the thousands of photographs to illustrate with accompanying descriptions in the book. As for next steps, I think it would be amazing. And in fact, the Kelsey is prepared to do that. Part of the process was us scanning in high resolution a series of photos. We've scanned 2,000 photos, and the next step is to put them up online with metadata so that scholars can access them and use them. And hopefully that will help those who are more firmly, I think, squarely placed in archaeology than I am as well. So hopefully that'll come in useful to other people. And I'd like it to be useful to those who are really interested in historiography, because when we talk about historiography, we have a tendency to overlook the role that photographs might play in the labor that becomes the historiographical labor itself. And we know that arguments in Castle have shifted on the ground as things were being found. And you can see photographs of folks like Gruber and Hullet and their team members actually arguing and debating on site at night while having dinner, etc. So you see that even some of the major arguments that we associate with highbrow historiography might just be conjured up over a hard drink at midnight, and then it takes off from there. And that was the case actually at Castle Hair. What is this thing? Is it a city? Is it a palace? An urban entity? That's what they fought over, over some liquor one night, and that became historiography right there. It's that informality we tend to overlook, right? Of minds coming together and flexing with each other.
Yes, I mean they produce certain ideas, and that they shape their ideas during those informal meetings. I mean, we all do. I mean, that's part of our experience. But the sort of the written record is based on written record. So, and that these conversations are not part of historiographical analysis, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's the substratum you find in photographs and in the letters. And there are a couple letters that we found that were really kind of stunning. So Creswell, who's also very well known, so for the history of archaeology and architecture, Creswell actually, and we have the letter, tried to steal the site from Gruber by interfering with the Syrian Ministry of Antiquities. So we actually then see scholars trying to, basically steal digs from one another. And then when that doesn't happen, you see a scholar like Creswell vehemently disagreeing with the major arguments of the finds. And you then start to think, well, what else is under the disagreement that is pitched as a historiographical one, but there's also, policing of boundaries and turf issues, and those you find in the historical record as well. So it really sheds light on those waves, which are very and deeply personal also.
Oleg Gruber didn't write his memoirs, no? I mean, published or unpublished. Do you?
No, but my colleague Shreve Simpson, along with my Michigan colleague Elizabeth Sears, spent several days recording an interview with him at the Institute. It must have been 20 years ago. And Betsy had an assistant create a typescript of those interviews. And luckily, I have that typescript on file. It's about 200 pages long.
Is it slated for publication in the future at some point?
It's not right now.
Right now, okay.
Not right now. But I've read through it all, and it's astonishing and really interesting to see how Oleg Gruber talks about his career, where he fits historiographically, and so on.
Yeah,
I think Andras has something.
Yes, Andras Schindlermeyer has something to say. Please unmute yourself. And
yeah, I just wanted to say that I believe the Getty has the recording, and it's available online through the Getty's website.
Are you sure about that? Because there are certain
I'm
things.
not. I'm speaking from memory, but I know they have the recording.
I will check with Betsy, because there are certain things that she said. The reason it's not published is that he mentions many, many people who are still alive. And so there has to be some selective excision of information.
Yeah, but do check, because I know they have the recording.
Okay, great. He must have, that must have joined his library, which he had sold to the Getty back in the day,
Yeah.
right? So thank you for letting me know. If it is in the Getty, that means it's publishable. Folks have been sitting on the interview just because there are privacy issues involved in, someone speaking about colleagues for several days.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. So we have some notes on chat box from Joanne. Thank you very much, and from Judith. She also thanks you. Any other questions? So if there are,
For Andras, I had a question for Andras.
go ahead.
Did Oleg leave any personal files at Harvard at all?
I'm not aware of any that he has left. I do remember the first time I ever went into his office. On the wall was an enlargement of a picture of him at Kasarher carrying a huge, heavy stone. So clearly this is something that meant a lot to him.
Yeah, he said that in a lot of ways, his favorite job that he ever had was at Michigan. And he said that was where he got his wings and the support. So he had really strong, very fond memories of Michigan. So everywhere you turn at Michigan, you really can feel his presence too, including at the Kelsey. So if any of you are really interested in this material, please don't hesitate to come visit us. We make these materials completely free and accessible to whoever wants to see them. They need more work.
I think you mentioned at the beginning, but I don't remember. When did he move to Harvard? Do you remember?
1969.
1969. Okay.
Yep. I think it was at Michigan from 54 to 69. And then he was at Harvard from 69 until when, Andras? When did he go to the Institute? Do you remember?
Andras, you are...
Yeah, I don't remember because even after he went to Princeton, he kept coming back a lot.
Yeah.
But it was sometime in the 90s.
He was there by the time I got there for undergrad. So he was there by 94. So probably early 90s or so, which is when I met him as an undergraduate.
Thank you very much. So if there are no other questions, perhaps Joanne can stop the recording, and we don't have to leave the forum, but we can move into a more informal.
I will stop the recording now, just so everyone knows.